Let's have a quick look at what's called the New Atheism. That's a term which refers to the atheism, particularly of what were called the Four Horsemen. That's Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett. There were four prominent atheists who spoke very strongly against religion.
I'm not impressed by that, because there are a similar number of people who are Hindu, brought up Hindus, and say, I felt the presence of Lord Krishna and etc. I mean, there are all sorts of illusions that the human brain is very capable of creating.
Friedrich Nietzsche famously said that God was dead, and Sigmund Freud can be rendered as having said that God was dad. And I think both of them are probably right. The concept of God is like everything else in our vocabulary, man-made. It's an invention of human beings.
The belief system is still anchored to a belief in revelation. They're still fixated on the text, but they have ignored much of what seems untenable in the text, and they don't have an argument about why that's okay. Because if God wrote any of these books, and nowhere in the book does God say, well, you could ignore the first half because now I'm getting to the good part. It's all God's words. It's actually a less principled position than fundamentalism.
To stop thinking.
To stop thinking. To say, I don't have to think about that because my religion says this is right, this is wrong, it's as clear as that, it's black and white. I don't have to think about this anymore. We have to stop honoring people for stopping thinking.
Particularly, Christopher Hitchens maybe coined the term or popularized it, that he called himself, he said, I'm not an atheist, I'm an anti-theist. Actually, there's nothing new about this atheism. As stated in Bhagavad-gita so many centuries ago, some people are attracted to atheistic views. What's new about that? Even in terms of this Western society, there's a grotesque quote translated from French. Man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest. Translated from French and variously ascribed to Denis Diderot, who lived in the 18th century, or just a little before him, Jean Meslier, who was a French Catholic priest and a closet atheist. And listen what they say. They say religion is bad because of its atrocities. And here we have these atheists saying that we need to finish off all the kings and the clergy in the most horrific way. Now I want to talk about the atheistic mindset and its manifestation in science. Atheism is based on four propositions. Number one, that the universe consists of material particles that exist independently of each other and move independently of each other within the infinite void. Of course, that's one perspective. There's also the wave perspective. But anyway, for the sake of brevity and simplicity, we can say this, that the total of the movements and interactions of these particles is governed by coincidence and chaos, combined with a number of simple, blind laws of nature. There is not, has never been, and cannot be a central intelligence coordination unit within the universe. And the universe is not an organic unity. In other words, everything is matter and there's no God. This is sometimes called plurality, a word which has several meanings in this context, refers to the proposition which I just stated. Number two proposition, nothing exists from or outside the perceptible physical material reality or the world of matter. Matter is all that exists in the universe, nothing spiritual. So these two propositions together constitute what is called materialism in the philosophical sense, philosophical materialism, sometimes called physicalism or naturalism. They're unprovable, they're statements of faith.
If those laws, if the implication is that those laws were cunningly designed, cunningly crafted, as many people think they were, so that atoms should come into existence, so that chemistry should come into existence, so that stars should come into existence, so that nuclear reactions in stars could produce the elements, so that they'd explode and we'd get a suitable chemistry to make life and then the origin of life and so on. If the deistic God thought all that through and set up the laws of physics, then he would have to be damn clever. He would have to be the physicist to end all physicists. I don't care if he then withdraws. He needs an explanation in his own right. And it seems to me that the noble scientific enterprise is to start from as near nothing as you can get.
Proposition number 3 of atheists is that even if there is a beginning to the universe, which scientists now largely accept, they didn't accept this until about 100 years ago, even if there is a beginning to the universe, it can't be God. The origin of the universe has to be ultimately simple, and God by definition has to be complex, and therefore some postulated God cannot be the ultimate cause. The existence of a complex being called God would demand that he would have to be created by someone or something else. Of course, why the origin has to be ultimately simple is again just a matter of doctrine or dogma. Point number 4, the universe is imperfect from a human perspective. That imperfection manifests most clearly in pointless suffering that humans are faced with. This contradicts the idea of God as being almighty and merciful. In other words, if God is almighty, he can do whatever he likes, he can stop all suffering. And if God is all merciful, he should stop the suffering. So why is there suffering? That means there can't be God. This is called the problem of evil, and many Western theistic philosophers consider this to be a serious intellectual objection to the existence of God. There's a whole department of Christian apologetics called theodicy, which means arguments that attempt to resolve the problem of evil. It's very hard to explain according to the Abrahamic religion's theology, but if we accept the reality of reincarnation, it's clear why there's suffering in the world. And I'll discuss that elsewhere in this series of talks. Science asserts that there are no sources of knowledge of the universe other than the intellectual probing into analysis of working over of very carefully scrutinized observations. Knowledge cannot be derived from revelation, intuition, or divination. Although so many scientific discoveries, they come about by eureka, something like revelation or intuition. Richard Levitin is a leading mainstream evolutionary biologist, and he admitted as follows: our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failures to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, but that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. The eminent Kant scholar Louis Beck used to say that anyone who could believe in God could believe in anything. To appeal to an omnipotent deity is to allow that at any moment the regularities of nature may be ruptured, that miracles may happen. That's not allowed in science, because science is atheistic. Contradictions, impossibilities, counterintuitive or plain fantastic ideas can be found in so many proposals that are made either in the name of science or spirituality. If you dig deep enough, contradictions are resolved not by reasoning within the contradiction, but by viewing from a higher level, seeing the bigger picture. If we see things that seem contradictory and both seem to be factual, then we have to rise to a higher level of understanding. As Einstein said, one of his many famous quotes, that problems cannot be solved at the level of understanding by which they were created.